The 3rd of September, 1941. Richmond, California. The fog hangs low over San Francisco Bay, heavy with the smell of salt and diesel, as a lone night watchman named Frank Delaney walks the perimeter fence of a half-finished shipyard that did not exist a year ago. Somewhere beyond the dark water, a freighter's horn moans, long and hollow, and Delaney pauses, listening, his breath visible in the cold Pacific air. He does not know how to weld, but he knows this place matters now in a way nothing ever has before. The floodlights flicker on one by one, revealing skeletal cranes frozen mid-reach, steel ribs of hulls rising like unfinished cathedrals. This is Kaiser Shipyard No. 1, carved out of mudflats and marsh in a matter of months. Only a handful of workers move at this hour, their boots clanging against steel plates as they hurry to meet a schedule dictated not by clocks, but by war. Across the Atlantic, the war has already found its rhythm. German U-boats hunt in wolf packs, their commanders cool and methodical as they slip beneath the waves to fire torpedoes into the dark bellies of Allied merchant ships. In the North Atlantic, the sea burns nightly, oil slicks igniting as cargo ships break apart, sailors screaming in languages from Brooklyn to Liverpool before the water closes over them. Winston Churchill will later say that the only thing that truly frightened him during the war was the U-boat menace. In September 1941, that fear is already well justified. America, officially neutral but increasingly entangled, feels the pull of those distant explosions. Supplies are moving west to east in an unbroken stream. Food, fuel, trucks, ammunition, aircraft parts. Everything depends on ships, and ships are dying faster than anyone can replace them. In Washington, planners stare at production charts with a growing sense of dread. Traditional shipbuilding is too slow, too artisanal, too dependent on skilled labor that simply does not exist in sufficient numbers. A cargo vessel can take more than a year to complete, sometimes 2. At that pace, the arithmetic of war is brutal and unforgiving. Lose 3 ships this month, launch 1 next year, and the ocean will belong to the enemy. Henry J. Kaiser, a gravel-voiced industrialist better known for dams and roads than warships, sees the problem differently. To him, ships are not masterpieces. They are products. And products, Kaiser believes, can be built faster if one abandons tradition without apology. He has convinced the U.S. Maritime Commission to let him try something radical on the West Coast. Shipyards run not like shipyards, but like automobile factories. The idea is heretical. Old shipbuilders scoff openly. Ships are not cars, they say. Steel hulls demand patience, craftsmanship, and years of apprenticeship. Kaiser listens, nods, and ignores them. He hires engineers who have never built a ship. He recruits farmers, clerks, housewives, and teenagers. He tells them they will learn on the job, and that the job will not wait for perfection. Frank Delaney hears rumors of all this as he walks his night rounds. He hears that men are arriving by the thousands, pouring off trains at Richmond Station. He hears that women are being trained as welders, their hair wrapped in scarves, sparks flying inches from their faces. He hears that Kaiser wants to build ships in sections, like giant steel puzzles, then weld them together at the dock. Most of it sounds impossible. Just before dawn, Delaney stops again, this time at the water's edge. The tide is coming in, slapping gently against the pilings. He imagines the ships that will soon sit here, their hulls deep and heavy, bound for oceans he has never seen. Somewhere out there, men are dying because ships are too slow to be born. He does not know their names, but he feels their absence like a weight in his chest. 3 months from now, America will be at war. On the 7th of December 1941, the sky over Pearl Harbor will fill with smoke and fire, and neutrality will vanish in a single morning. When that happens, the half-built yard Delaney patrols will no longer be an experiment. It will be a lifeline. Even now, before the bombs, the urgency is unmistakable. Kaiser's managers pace the docks with clipboards, arguing over minutes and inches. Engineers argue about welding seams late into the night. New workers arrive wide-eyed, hands blistered, learning to read blueprints by flashlight. Every delay feels like a death sentence written in advance. Out on the Atlantic, a German submarine commander named Günther Prien peers through his periscope at another dark silhouette on the horizon, unaware that on the far side of the world, men like Delaney are standing watch over an industrial revolution that will one day make his victories meaningless. The war at sea is being fought not just with torpedoes and depth charges, but with time, steel, and human endurance. As the first pale light of morning spreads across Richmond's unfinished docks, the watchman resumes his walk, boots echoing on concrete, while behind him the cranes stand ready, waiting for the moment when this quiet harbor will begin launching ships faster than the enemy can sink them. The 8th of December 1941, Richmond, California. The morning after Pearl Harbor breaks cold and brittle. The air split by the shriek of whistles, as thousands of men and women surge through the gates of Kaiser's Richmond Shipyards. Joe Martinez, a former grocery clerk from Oakland, tightens the borrowed helmet on his head and stares up at a hull section towering above him. Its steel skin still raw and dark from the mill. Somewhere in the distance, a radio crackles with the voice of President Franklin Roosevelt, solemn and unyielding, declaring a date that will live in infamy. Joe barely hears it. The yard itself has begun to roar. The declaration of war transforms everything overnight. What had been an ambitious industrial gamble becomes a national emergency measured in lives lost per day. Within hours, orders flood in from Washington. The Maritime Commission wants ships, cargo ships, fast and simple, and they want them immediately. The Liberty ship, officially designated the EC-2SC-1, is suddenly no longer a design on paper, but a mandate. Joe is handed a welding torch before he fully understands how it works. The training is brief, relentless, and unforgiving. Instructors shout over the din of riveting guns and cranes, teaching by repetition and urgency rather than theory. Mistakes are corrected instantly or not at all. There is no time for mastery. Only competence matters now. The Liberty ship itself is a study in brutal simplicity. Based loosely on a British tramp steamer design, it is ugly by naval standards. A blunt bow, squared lines, a single screw, and a triple expansion steam engine that would have looked old-fashioned even in the First World War. But it can be built with minimal machining, assembled from prefabricated sections, and repaired almost anywhere in the world. It is a ship designed not to impress, but to endure. German intelligence, watching from afar, dismisses the Liberty ships as floating coffins. Reports circulate in Berlin that the vessels are poorly made, prone to cracking, slow and defenseless. U-boat commanders joke about them openly, confident that quantity will never overcome skill. For now, the kill tallies support their confidence. In early 1942, Allied shipping losses reach catastrophic levels. Off the American East Coast, U-boats operate almost with impunity, torpedoing ships silhouetted against city lights in what sailors bitterly call the second happy time. Back in Richmond, Henry Kaiser moves through the yards with relentless energy. He wears no uniform, holds no rank, but commands absolute authority. He pushes managers to tear down bottlenecks, to reimagine workflows, to eliminate anything that smells of tradition. Riveting, slow and labor-intensive, is increasingly replaced by welding. Hulls are divided into dozens of sub-assemblies, built simultaneously by different crews, then moved into place by cranes that swing overhead like mechanical giants. Joe Martinez learns to read the sparks. A good weld sings, steady and bright. A bad one spits and falters. His hands blister, then toughen. He works 12 hours a day, sometimes 14, pausing only when the whistle blows or exhaustion forces him to lean against the steel and breathe. Around him, women welders, some barely out of high school, others grandmothers, work with equal intensity, their faces streaked with sweat and soot. They do not talk much. The noise makes conversation pointless, and the pace leaves little energy for words. The yard becomes a city unto itself. Cafeterias operate around the clock. Child care centers spring up near the gates so mothers can work uninterrupted shifts. Housing projects rise almost as quickly as the ships, rows of identical homes filling the hills around Richmond. Trains arrive day and night, bringing workers from across the country. Dust Bowl, refugees, Southern sharecroppers, recent immigrants. They bring accents, habits, and tensions, but the work grinds them into a shared rhythm. On January nights, the bay glows with arc light, turning fog into a shimmering veil. The clang of steel echoes for miles. Joe sometimes thinks of the ships already lost, the sailors clinging to wreckage in freezing water. He has never met a merchant seaman, but the thought of them drives him through the fatigue. Every completed weld feels like a small act of defiance. In Washington, production numbers begin to creep upward. A Liberty ship that once took more than 200 days to build is now being completed in under 100. Admirals remain skeptical. They need ships yesterday, not next month. Kaiser responds by demanding more from his yards, setting targets that seem absurd even to his own managers. He talks openly about weeks instead of months, days instead of weeks. Critics warn of corner cutting, of structural failures, of disaster waiting to happen. Some of their fears are not unfounded. Early Liberty ships suffer from brittle fractures, hulls cracking in cold seas due to poor steel quality and inexperienced welding. Investigations follow, adjustments are made, steel composition altered, weld techniques improved. The fixes come not through caution, but through iteration at speed. Joe witnesses one of the first launches he helped build in February 1942. The ship slides into the water amid cheers and band music, champagne breaking against the bow. It is over, almost as soon as it begins. There is no time for ceremony. Another hull waits on the ways, and another after that. The ocean is still hungry, far away. Beneath the Atlantic swells, U-boat commanders continue their hunt, unaware that the tempo of American industry is accelerating beyond anything they have ever imagined. For now, the balance of the war at sea remains uncertain, but in the clangor of Richmond's yards, a new equation is being written in steel and sweat. The 14th of June, 1942. Richmond, California. The sun is already high when the yard whistle screams, and Anna Kowalski flinches despite having heard it 1,000 times before. She adjusts the leather gloves on her hands, steps into position beside a hull section the size of a house, and waits for the crane operator's signal. The steel plate swings slowly toward her, groaning on its cables, and for a moment the entire world seems to balance on that motion. If it goes wrong, men and women will die. If it goes right, no one will notice. That is the rhythm of wartime production. Anna had been a waitress in Sacramento before the war. She had never held a tool heavier than a coffee pot. Now she is a certified welder, one of tens of thousands trained in a matter of weeks under a system that values speed, repetition, and ruthless efficiency. She knows the danger. She has seen a man crushed when a section shifted unexpectedly, heard the sickening crack of bone under steel. The yard does not stop for accidents. It pauses, cleans the blood, and resumes. By mid-1942, Kaiser's Richmond yards are operating at a scale no one had thought possible. Yard. No one has been joined by yards no. 2, 3, and 4. Sprawling complexes that stretch along the shoreline like industrial fortresses. Cranes dominate the skyline, their booms swinging in constant motion. At any given moment, dozens of Liberty ships are under construction, each at a different stage, each governed by charts that break the process into thousands of discrete tasks measured in minutes. The learning curve is brutal but effective. Supervisors stop entire crews to demonstrate better techniques, then demand immediate correction. There is no patience for pride. A worker who cannot adapt is reassigned or dismissed. The war does not wait for hurt feelings. Anna's crew specializes in midship sections, repetitive work that demands precision under exhaustion. She learns to trust her teammates implicitly, to read their movements without speaking. When a new worker joins the crew, green and uncertain, the veterans watch closely. One bad weld can doom an entire section. One lapse in attention can kill someone beneath a swinging load. Across the country, similar scenes play out in Baltimore, Mobile, and Portland. But Richmond becomes the symbol of something unprecedented. Kaiser's methods, prefabrication, modular construction, parallel workflows are studied, copied, and refined. The yards operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Time itself feels compressed. Days blur together, marked only by shift changes and the steady accumulation of finished hulls. At sea, the cost of delay remains horrifying. German U-boats sink more than 3 million tons of Allied shipping. Tankers burn within sight of American beaches. Survivors wash ashore with stories that harden public resolve. Newspapers publish photographs of oil-slicked coastlines and empty lifeboats. The message is unmistakable. Build faster, or lose the war. Anna hears the news secondhand, filtered through break-room conversations and snatches of radio broadcasts. She understands the stakes in her arms, in the ache of her back, in the trembling fatigue that follows her home each night. She sleeps in a government-built apartment with 3 other women, rising before dawn to do it all again. Henry Kaiser pushes harder. He challenges his managers to reduce build times by weeks, then by days. He introduces incentive systems that reward crews for meeting impossible targets. Competition emerges between yards, between shifts, between teams working on identical sections. Pride becomes a weapon, carefully cultivated and relentlessly exploited. The Liberty ship design itself continues to evolve. Engineers adjust weld patterns, reinforce stress points, and standardize components even further. A ship is no longer a singular creation. It is the sum of interchangeable parts, each produced by specialists like Anna, who may never see the finished vessel sail. The idea of craftsmanship gives way to the logic of throughput. Skeptics remain. Naval officers worry about quality. Traditional shipbuilders mutter about shoddy work and inexperienced hands. Then the ships begin to arrive overseas, in numbers that defy expectation. Convoys grow longer. Losses continue, but replacements now appear faster than the sinkings can erase them. For the first time, planners glimpse the possibility of overwhelming the enemy through sheer volume. Anna attends a launch in late June, standing among thousands as a completed Liberty ship slides into the bay. She watches the hull take the water cleanly, hears the cheer rise, feels a surge of emotion she cannot fully name. The ship's name is painted on the bow in white letters, honoring a man she has never heard of. It does not matter. The ship exists. It will carry cargo. It will change the balance, if only a little. That night, as she scrubs grease from her hands, Anna listens to the distant horns of ships moving through the bay. The work will resume at dawn. It always does. And with every shift, the gap between what the enemy expects and what America can deliver grows wider. The 2nd of October 1942. Richmond, California. Rain lashes the yard in cold sheets, turning walkways slick and the air sharp with the smell of ozone and wet steel. Shouts himself hoarse as he jogs between stations. Boots, splashing through puddles that reflect the glare of arc lights overhead. The weather would have shut the yard down a year ago. Now it barely slows it. Time has become the enemy, and the clock must be broken. Sam had been a machinist in peacetime, trained to value precision and caution. As a foreman under Kaiser, he has had to unlearn much of what he once believed. His job is no longer to perfect individual tasks, but to keep the entire system moving. If one crew falls behind, 10 others will follow. If a crane sits idle, the schedule collapses. Sam does not think in hours anymore. He thinks in seconds. By the fall of 1942, the Richmond yards are approaching something astonishing. Liberty ships that once took months are now being launched in under 70 days, then under 60. Each reduction is celebrated briefly, then rendered obsolete by the next demand. Kaiser's managers post production charts on walls for all to see, red lines slashing downward as build times shrink. The message is unmistakable. Faster is possible, and anything less is failure. The secret is not a single innovation, but the ruthless integration of many. Prefabricated sections arrive at the dock already fitted with piping, wiring, and bulkheads. Crews work in parallel rather than sequence, assembling bow, stern, and midship sections simultaneously. Welding replaces riveting almost entirely, reducing labor and allowing work to continue in conditions that would have halted older methods. Nothing waits unless it absolutely must. Sam spends his days resolving crises before they metastasize. A delayed steel shipment threatens to idle 2 shifts. He reroutes material from another yard. A crew falls behind due to fatigue. He swaps in a rested team, pushing the exhausted workers into a recovery rotation rather than letting them collapse on the job. The human cost is constant and visible. Strained marriages, injuries, nervous exhaustion. There is no space to dwell on it. Across the Atlantic, the war at sea remains vicious. Allied convoy escorts are improving. Radar and sonar growing more effective. But U-boats still claim victims nightly. The difference now is in the numbers. For every ship sunk, another seems to appear, sliding down the ways somewhere in America. German intelligence reports growing frustration. Sinkings remain high, but strategic impact begins to blur. The ocean is filling with targets that do not disappear fast enough. In Richmond, the pace creates its own dangers. Welding at speed increases the risk of defects. Inspectors work tirelessly, crawling through half-finished hulls with flashlights and gauges, marking questionable seams with chalk. Some sections are cut out and redone, time be damned. Others pass with grudging approval. The balance between speed and safety is constantly renegotiated, sometimes in shouted arguments on the deck plates. Sam remembers the day a hull section cracked during fitting. A sharp metallic report echoing through the yard. Work stopped instantly. Engineers swarmed the site, tracing stress lines, recalculating loads. The flaw is corrected within hours, the schedule barely dented. The lesson is clear. Mistakes are acceptable only if they are immediate teachers. The workers feel the pressure acutely. Workers trade rumors of record-setting builds, of ships completed faster than anyone thought possible. In October, Kaiser announces an audacious goal. Even Sam, hardened by months of impossible demands, feels a flicker of doubt. But the system is already bending toward that outcome. Processes tighten. Delays are shaved away. Redundancies are eliminated. The clock ticks faster. One night, as rain continues to fall, Sam pauses at the edge of the dock and watches a nearly completed hull loom in the darkness. Floodlights reveal fresh paint, still glistening. Workers swarm over it like ants, welding, bolting, inspecting. He thinks of the men who will sail this ship, who will trust their lives to the seams he has helped schedule into existence. Far from Richmond, a U-boat commander pores over reports showing an unsettling trend. Allied tonnage is no longer declining as expected. Sinkings continue, but replacement curves are rising. The math is changing. He does not know the names of the men and women breaking themselves against steel on the American coast. He only knows that the ocean is no longer emptying. As the rain eases and the night shift presses on, Sam marks another completed task on his clipboard. It is a small act, almost meaningless on its own. Taken together, these acts are dismantling the enemy's greatest advantage, 1 minute at a time. The 14th of November, 1942. Richmond, California. The yard is electric with a tension that feels almost celebratory as Charlie Olson, a young naval inspector, checks his watch beneath the glare of floodlights. Steam rises from warm steel into the cold night air, and every man and woman on the dock seems to know they are standing inside a moment meant to be remembered. Before them sits the hull of the SS Robert E. Peary, a Liberty ship unlike any other, not because of its design, but because of how quickly it has come into being. The clock started ticking just days ago. Kaiser had thrown down a challenge not just to his own yards, but to the world. prove that mass production could shatter every assumption about shipbuilding. The Peary is the answer. Built as a demonstration, a proof of concept, every element of its construction has been choreographed with almost theatrical precision. Inspectors hovered constantly, clearing bottlenecks in real time. Charlie moves along the deck, clipboard in hand, his breath fogging as he checks weld seams and alignment marks. He knows the critics are watching, ready to pounce on any flaw. Naval brass, journalists, politicians, all have gathered to see whether this feat will stand scrutiny or collapse under its own audacity. A ship built too fast, some say, is a ship built to fail. The Peary takes shape in an astonishing 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. Hull sections that would normally be fitted over weeks are lifted into place in minutes. Welders work in overlapping teams, their arcs flashing like lightning across the steel skin. There is no room for error, but there is also no time for hesitation. Every worker knows their role, their sequence, their window. Charlie remembers the moment the final section is set. A hush ripples through the crowd as the crane releases its load and the steel settles into place. Then the noise returns, louder than before. Whistles blow. Men shout. Some laugh, others simply stare, exhausted and disbelieving. The impossible has happened in plain sight. The launch is immediate. There is no delay for ceremony beyond the bare minimum. The ship slides into the water amid cheers and camera flashes, her hull cutting cleanly into the bay. She floats. That alone answers 1,000 objections. Charlie feels a tightness in his chest as the reality sinks in. It is a statement. Kaiser, beaming, speaks to reporters about what this means. He is careful to emphasize that this speed will not be the norm, that quality and safety remain paramount. Privately, his managers know the truth is more complicated. The Peary is an extreme, a stress test of the system, but stress tests reveal limits, and limits can be pushed. Critics seize on the demonstration, calling it propaganda, a parlor trick achieved only by throwing unlimited resources at a single ship. They are not entirely wrong, but they miss the deeper point. The same methods, scaled and refined, are already transforming everyday production. Even if most Liberty ships take 40 to 50 days, the psychological barrier has been shattered. For the workers, the Peary becomes legend. Stories spread through the yards, growing with each retelling. Pride swells. Fatigue feels momentarily lighter. The knowledge that they have rewritten what is possible sustains them through the next grueling shifts. At sea, the impact is not immediate, but it is inevitable. The Germans continue to sink ships, but intelligence officers begin to notice a troubling resilience. Convoys destroyed 1 month are reconstituted the next. Ports that should be starved remain active. The tonnage war, once comfortably in Axis favor, is tilting. Charlie watches the Peary settle at the pier after her launch, tugs easing her into position. She looks no different from any other Liberty ship, her lines plain, her purpose utilitarian. Yet she carries with her a message that will echo far beyond Richmond. Time itself can be manufactured. As the crowd disperses and the yard returns to its relentless rhythm, Charlie signs off on his final inspection and hands in his clipboard. Another hull waits nearby, already rising. The record has been set, but the war demands repetition, not spectacle. The true victory will be counted not in days, but in ships that arrive faster than the enemy can destroy them. The 3rd of March, 1943. The convoy pounds through heavy seas under a slate-gray sky, waves smashing against the bow of the Liberty ship SS John W. Brown, as if trying to force her back into the water she has already conquered. Able seaman Thomas Green grips the rail, knuckles white, feeling the vibration of the engine through the steel deck. He has been at sea before, but never on a ship like this new, plain, and born in a factory at a speed that still seems unreal. Green does not know the names of the women who welded this hull or the foremen who scheduled its assembly. He only knows that the ship feels solid beneath his boots, her engine steady, her holds packed with trucks, ammunition, and crates of canned food destined for Britain. Around him, dozens of similar ships stretch across the horizon, a floating testament to something unprecedented. There are more of them now, many more. By early 1943, the balance in the Battle of the Atlantic is shifting perceptibly. Allied anti-submarine tactics are improving, but the decisive factor is volume. Liberty ships are leaving American yards at a staggering rate, nearly 3 a day across all shipyards. Losses remain high, but replacements arrive faster. Greene's convoy zigzags methodically, escorted by destroyers and corvettes whose sonar pings echo through the water like a mechanical heartbeat. The crew knows the danger is constant. U-boats still lurk, patient and lethal. When the alarm sounds, men run to their stations with practiced urgency, eyes scanning the gray water for the telltale wake of a torpedo. Below the surface, a German submarine commander studies his charts with growing unease. Sinkings continue, but the strategic effect feels diminished. Each victory seems to be absorbed, neutralized by an endless stream of new hulls. Reports from headquarters grow tense, demanding higher tallies, greater efficiency. Back in Richmond, the yards have reached a brutal efficiency. Build times average just over 40 days, with some ships completed even faster. The 5-day record stands as an outlier, but its legacy is everywhere in tightened schedules, in crews that trust the system, in managers who no longer flinch at aggressive targets. The industrial machine runs hot, fed by steel, electricity, and human endurance. Greene experiences the results firsthand when the convoy is attacked at night. A freighter ahead erupts in flame, the explosion lighting the sky. Orders bark over the intercom. The John W. Brown shudders as she turns hard to port, engines straining. A torpedo passes astern, close enough to feel as a dull thump through the hull. Men gasp, then resume their duties. The ship survives. The convoy regroups. Another loss, but not a collapse. Dawn reveals the damage. Oil slicks mark where a ship once sailed, but the line holds. The survivors are taken aboard other vessels. The convoy presses on. For Greene, the lesson is clear. The enemy can still kill ships, but he cannot kill the flow. German morale begins to erode. U-boat losses mount as Allied tactics improve, and air cover extends farther into the Atlantic. For every submarine sunk, months of training and irreplaceable crews are lost. Meanwhile, American yards replace merchant ships in weeks. The asymmetry grows unbearable. Greene stands watch as the convoy approaches the British Isles, gray cliffs emerging from mist. The cargo he carries will fuel armies, feed cities, and keep factories running. He feels a quiet gratitude toward the unseen hands that built his ship, toward the relentless tempo that brought him here alive. When the John W. Brown docks safely, Greene disembarks and looks back at her hull. Scarred by spray, but intact. He knows she will sail again soon. And again. And again. Each voyage is a small victory, multiplied across hundreds of ships, in Richmond and yards like it. The work continues without pause. The Atlantic is being flooded not with water, but with steel. And in that flood, the U-boat threat is slowly, inexorably drowning. The 22nd of July 1943. Richmond, California. The heat settles over the shipyard like a physical weight, pressing down on the steel decks until they radiate warmth through the soles of every boot. The air smells of hot metal, sweat, and burned insulation. Luis Hernandez, a maintenance electrician on the graveyard shift, wipes his forehead with a rag already soaked through, and crouches beside a junction box that has failed for the 3rd time this week. The lights over Dock 3 flicker, and for a moment the entire operation feels as fragile as the wiring in his hands. By the summer of 1943, the Richmond shipyards are producing Liberty ships at a pace that would have seemed delusional 18 months earlier. 42 days has become a benchmark, not a miracle. Some hulls beat it. Others miss by a few hours and are quietly scrutinized for wasted motion. The system works, but only because it is being pushed to its absolute limits. Luis knows those limits intimately. Every crane, every welding rig, Every conveyor is run almost continuously. Preventive maintenance is done on the fly, often with equipment still warm from use. Breakdowns are not inconveniences. They are emergencies that ripple outward, threatening entire schedules. When something fails, Luis and his crew sprint toward it, tools clattering at their belts, aware that minutes matter. The human strain is even greater. Workers rotate through shifts with barely enough time to sleep. Accidents rise with fatigue. Fingers are lost. Backs give out. Nervous exhaustion sends some men and women quietly away, replaced almost immediately by new arrivals. The yards never empty. They simply churn, yet the output continues to climb. Across American shipyards, Liberty ships are now launching faster than German submarines can be built, trained, and deployed. The numbers tell a story the enemy can no longer ignore. In May 1943, U-boat losses spike catastrophically. Wolf packs are broken apart by radar-equipped aircraft and coordinated escorts. The Atlantic, once a hunter's domain, becomes increasingly hostile. German naval command reacts with fury and disbelief. Reports accuse the Americans of exaggeration, of statistical manipulation. Surely no nation can build ships at this rate, they argue. Surely quality must be collapsing, yet the convoys keep arriving. Ports remain supplied. Armies prepare for invasions that would be impossible without this logistical backbone. In Richmond, Luis watches a new Liberty ship slide into the water during a brief pause in his shift. The launch is almost perfunctory now. A few cheers, a splash of champagne, and then the workers turn back to the next hull, already rising behind it. The spectacle has been normalized, absorbed into routine. That, he realizes, is the true revolution. The yards themselves are evolving. Liberty ships are no longer the only focus. A new design, the Victory ship, is already entering production. Faster and more capable, building on every lesson learned. The system that Liberty ships created will not stop with them. It cannot. Momentum has become doctrine. Luis finishes the repair and snaps the junction box shut. Cranes resume their dance. Welders strike arcs. Somewhere across the ocean, a German submarine slips beneath the waves. Its commander increasingly aware that time is no longer on his side. Each patrol feels more dangerous than the last, each sinking less meaningful. The enemy's strength is no longer measured in ships alone, but in the capacity to replace them without pause. As night falls over Richmond, the heat finally begins to ease, though the work does not. The yards glow against the darkened bay, a constellation of industry visible for miles. There is only the next task, the next repair, the next launch. But taken together, these exhausted movements, these flickering lights and hurried fixes, are crushing an enemy who once believed the Atlantic could be starved into submission. The shipyards are stretched thin, fraying at the edges, yet they hold. And as long as they hold, the war's arithmetic continues to turn against the axis. The 18th of September, 1943. Berlin, Germany. The room smells of stale smoke and damp wool as Kapitan Zur. See Ernst Vogel studies the latest tonnage charts under a bare bulb that hums faintly overhead. He traces a finger along the red and blue lines, his jaw tightening. The blue marks replacements. For the first time since the war began, the blue line is no longer trailing behind. It is climbing past, indifferent to every sinking his U-boats have claimed. Vogel is not a sailor at sea anymore. He has been pulled ashore, reassigned to analysis, to explaining failure in neat columns and grim memoranda. The explanation he is expected to provide does not exist in the terms his superiors prefer. There has been no single tactical blunder, no collapse of courage among U-boat crews. The enemy has simply learned how to build faster than Germany can destroy. Across the ocean, that reality takes physical form every day. The 18th of September, 1943. Richmond, California. The yard is already alive before dawn, cranes swinging against a pale sky as Martha Jenkins, a scheduling clerk, flips through stacks of production sheets inside a cramped office overlooking Dock 2. Her pencil moves quickly, erasing, adjusting, rewriting. A delay here can ripple across an entire hull. A missing component there can idle hundreds of workers. The war, at her desk, is fought in margins and minutes. Martha has never touched a welding torch or set foot inside a ship's hold. The flow of steel, engines, electrical systems, and trained labor must be continuous. Any interruption threatens the pace that has now become strategic doctrine. Liberty ships are rolling out in numbers once considered fantasy. More than 2,700 will be built before production ends. The majority launched in just a few astonishing years. The sheer scale alters everything. Allied planners stop asking whether supply lines can be maintained and start asking how far they can be extended. The answer, increasingly, is anywhere. In Britain, stockpiles swell. In North Africa and Italy, armies advance on schedules made possible by dependable shipping. Plans for a massive cross-channel invasion begin to solidify, their feasibility resting not on courage or tactics alone, but on the certainty that millions of tons of materiel can be delivered on time. That certainty flows directly from yards like Richmond. Martha hears fragments of this through official bulletins and overheard conversations. She knows only that the demands keep increasing. More ships, fewer delays, tighter margins. The system responds by refining itself yet again. Standardization deepens. Components become interchangeable across hulls. Training pipelines accelerate, turning raw recruits into specialized workers in weeks. There is exhaustion everywhere, but also a hardening sense of inevitability. The war is no longer balanced on a knife's edge. It is grinding forward, powered by output curves that refuse to bend. In Berlin, Vogel drafts his report with clinical honesty. He notes that U-boat losses now exceed sustainable levels. He notes that Allied shipping capacity absorbs losses without strategic impact. He stops short of the obvious conclusion, knowing it would be unwelcome. Back in Richmond, Martha watches another Liberty ship launch just after noon. The splash is clean. The ship settles quickly, tugs already moving in. Applause ripples briefly, then fades as workers turn back to their stations. There is no sense of climax, only continuation. That night, as she leaves the yard, Martha pauses at the gate and looks back at the forest of cranes silhouetted against the dark. She does not think in terms of victory or defeat. She thinks of tomorrow's schedule, of steel deliveries, of keeping the flow unbroken. Across the world, men like Vogel stare at charts and realize, with growing dread, that no countermeasure exists for an enemy who can manufacture time itself. The Atlantic has ceased to be a battleground of uncertainty. It has become an artery, pulsing steadily, carrying the weight of a war that is no longer in doubt. The 3rd of February 1944. Liverpool, England. A freezing wind cuts across the Mersey as Lieutenant Commander Robert Hale stands on the dock. Collar turned up, clipboard pressed against his chest. Before him stretches a line of Liberty ships tied bow to stern, their decks crowded with crates, vehicles, and bundled tarpaulins snapping in the cold. The harbor is no longer merely busy. It is saturated. The scale of it is almost frightening. Hale has spent his career in logistics, a discipline few notice until it fails. Now, as preparations accelerate for the largest amphibious invasion in history, he finds himself at the center of something unprecedented. Every figure he tracks, fuel, ammunition, rations, landing craft parts, depends on the same quiet miracle. Ships arriving on time, in volume, without pause. Liberty ships. They come in waves, unglamorous and indispensable. Paint scorched. Others are fresh from American yards, their steel still clean beneath winter grime. They unload, reload, and depart again with barely a pause. The turnaround is relentless. Hale remembers earlier years of the war, when every lost ship triggered frantic recalculations. Now, losses are accounted for with grim efficiency. Replacement tonnage is already en route before the wreckage sinks. The planners can think in terms of abundance rather than scarcity, and that changes everything. Across the Atlantic, The Richmond yards have never slowed. Liberty ship production is tapering only because priorities are shifting. Victory ships take their place, faster and more capable. Built by the same workforce using the same principles, the system born of desperation has matured into dominance. In England, Hale watches trucks roll down gangways, their tires thudding against steel. He checks manifests against reality, nodding as another box is accounted for. These supplies will cross the channel soon, feeding an invasion that will hinge on logistics as much as bravery. Every soldier who storms a beach will carry equipment that arrived by sea. Every shell fired inland will trace its lineage back to a factory and a shipyard thousands of miles away. German reconnaissance observes the buildup with alarm. Aerial photographs reveal ports swollen with shipping, fields filling with vehicles. Analysts know what it means. They also know there is little they can do. The U-boat arm has been battered, its reach curtailed. The production gulf is too wide. Hale receives a report of a Liberty ship sunk the previous week. He marks it, files it, and moves on. Another has already arrived to take its place. The arithmetic is merciless. At dusk, the harbor lights flicker on, illuminating hulls stacked with cargo like floating warehouses. Hale feels the weight of history pressing forward, carried not by speeches or banners, but by steel decks and cargo manifests. When the invasion comes, it will be remembered for courage under fire. Few will remember the ships that made it inevitable. Standing on the dock, Hale understands that inevitability has been built, welded, and launched piece by piece until resistance itself has been overwhelmed by supply. The 7th of June, 1944. Omaha Beach, Normandy. Smoke drifts low over the shattered shoreline as the tide pulls back, carrying debris, empty shell casings, and the dark stains of the previous day's fighting. Sergeant William Carter stands ankle-deep in wet sand, staring out at the gray-green water where ships crowd the horizon. Landing craft shuttle back and forth endlessly, their engines rattling, their decks slick with seawater and blood. The invasion has landed, but now it must be sustained. Carter fought his way ashore yesterday under fire that seemed impossible to survive. Today, his unit is exhausted, depleted, but alive. What keeps them moving forward is not just orders or adrenaline, but the steady arrival of everything they need to keep fighting. Ammunition crates stack up behind the dunes. Engineers unload steel matting. Medical supplies appear almost as if summoned. None of it is accidental. Just offshore, Liberty ships sit at anchor, blunt bows pointed toward France, their holds disgorging the material weight of an industrial superpower. They have come not as symbols, but as workhorses, indifferent to shellfire and weather alike. Some will be damaged, a few will be lost. It does not matter. Others are already on the way. The German defenders understand the implication almost immediately. They can kill men. They can destroy equipment. But they cannot stop the flow. The sea, once a barrier, has become a conveyor belt. Back in Richmond, news of the landings arrives through radio bulletins and newspaper headlines pinned to break room walls. There is no celebration. Shifts continue, uninterrupted. The yards have long since internalized the lesson that battles are won not on a single day, but by what follows. Liberty ships still slide into the water, even as victory ships increasingly dominate the ways. The logic remains unchanged. Output is power. For Carter, the realization comes slowly, in the days after the landing. Each night, he watches flares arc over the beach while ships unload under their glow. Each morning, more supplies are there than the day before. The enemy counterattacks, but they are blunt, poorly supported, starved of fuel and ammunition. The imbalance grows visible. German officers along the front send urgent messages inland, warning that Allied supply is overwhelming. The reports echo those written months earlier about the Atlantic War. As Carter advances inland, he passes wrecked German vehicles abandoned for lack of fuel. He does not know that the fuel shortage is not just a battlefield failure, but the end result of years of industrial defeat at sea. At night, he writes a short letter home, thanking his family and mentioning the ships offshore, how steady they look against the horizon. He does not know who built them. He only knows they are there, and that as long as they are, the fight will go on and be won. Behind him, the beaches continue to hum with activity. A mechanical heartbeat powered by steel hulls and welded seams. The breakthrough has come not just through bravery, but through a shipyard revolution that made defeat mathematically inevitable. The 15th of February 1945. Richmond, California. A cold wind sweeps across the nearly empty dock as Harold Bennett, a gray-haired quality inspector, walks slowly along a completed hull, his boots echoing in a way they never would have 2 years earlier. The noise is different now. Fewer cranes swing overhead. Fewer welding arcs crackle in the air. The yard is still active, but the frantic urgency that once defined every hour has begun to ebb. The war, everyone knows, is nearing its end. Harold runs a gloved hand along a weld seam, feeling for imperfections more out of habit than necessity. He has inspected hundreds of ships. Liberty ships first, then Victory ships. Each one a variation on a theme that changed the course of the war. He remembers the early days, when skepticism was loud and mistakes were common, when inspectors like him were seen as obstacles rather than safeguards. Now, the system barely needs him. It knows itself. Across the world, Allied armies push deep into Germany. The question is no longer whether the Axis can stop the advance, but how long it will take before collapse becomes unavoidable. The answer, increasingly, is measured in weeks. Harold reads the casualty reports posted in the yard office and thinks of the Atlantic, once filled with burning wrecks. U-boats are rare sights now, hunted nearly to extinction. The tonnage war has ended not with a dramatic battle, but with a whimper, smothered under an avalanche of steel. Liberty ship production has largely concluded. Their job is done. Many are already being laid up, sold, or reassigned. Some will sail for decades more, carrying grain, machinery, and memories of a war fought far beyond their decks. Others will rust quietly, anonymous and uncelebrated. There are no parades for the men and women who built them. No medals for welders or schedulers. Their victory is abstract, visible only in the absence of shortages, in the seamless movement of armies that never pause for lack of supply. Harold reaches the bow and looks out over the bay. The water is calm. He thinks of how many times this same view was framed by chaos and urgency, by shouted orders and impossible deadlines. The revolution that began here feels almost invisible now, absorbed into normality. What remains is the knowledge that something fundamental changed. The war proved that industrial speed could decide battles oceans away, that production was as lethal as any weapon. That lesson will not be forgotten. As Harold signs off on one of the last inspections of his career, he sets down his clipboard and takes a final look at the yard. The cranes stand tall, silent witnesses to a victory achieved not by a single blow, but by millions of precise, exhausting actions repeated until resistance collapsed. The triumph of steel was never loud. It did not announce itself with explosions or cheers. It simply arrived, on time, again and again, until the war could no longer continue. The 14th of August 1945, San Francisco Bay, California. Church bells ring across the water as sunlight glints off a line of anchored merchant ships riding quietly at their moorings. On the deck of an aging Liberty ship awaiting reassignment, former welder Anna Kowalski stands among a small crowd of civilians and sailors, listening as word spreads that Japan has accepted surrender terms. The war is over. The sound carries differently than she expected. Less explosive, more like a long-held breath finally released. The ship beneath her feet is scarred and faded now, paint worn thin by salt and years of service. It has crossed oceans Anna has never seen, carrying cargo she will never know by name. She touches the rail absently, feeling the familiar roughness of welded steel, and remembers the heat, the sparks, the exhaustion that once defined her days. Back then, victory was not a word anyone used. There was only the next section, the next shift, the next impossible deadline. Around the bay, ships sound their horns in deep, echoing notes. Sailors cheer. Some cry openly. The celebration feels almost restrained, shaped by years of discipline and loss. Anna watches it unfold with a strange detachment. She knows, in her bones, that this moment did not begin in a Capitol building or on a battlefield. It began in places like Richmond, where time itself was bent until it broke. Across the world, the Axis has been defeated not only by armies and fleets, but by arithmetic. German U-boats once believed they could starve the Allies into submission. They never imagined an enemy who would respond not ship for ship, but ship for day. By the time that realization dawned, it was too late. The ocean had been filled faster than it could be emptied. Historians will later debate tactics, personalities, and turning points. They will mark battles and speeches, invasions and surrenders. But beneath all of it lies a quieter truth. The Liberty Ship program changed the nature of modern warfare. It proved that industrial speed could overwhelm even the most skilled and determined opponent. It proved that production itself could be a weapon. Anna steps off the ship as the crowd begins to disperse. The yard she once knew is already changing. Cranes repurposed, docks quieter. Many Liberty ships will be scrapped. Others will serve in peace, anonymous and indispensable, just as they were in war. Their legacy will not be in museums, but in systems, in doctrines, in the understanding that wars are won long before the last shot is fired. As evening settles over the bay, the horns fall silent. The water calms. The ships remain. They always do.